have the center seat. Notice I've never taken over the center seat.
No.
You
guys make me sit up there for planning commission.
Yep, because you have input in that meeting, 5:30 and you're live.
Good evening. We'll now start the County Council Economic Development Committee for Tuesday, March 22nd, 2022. Roll call.
Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember LaFarge. Councilmember Felton. Present.
Did you see any corrections?
In the minutes, no. So wait, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes, right?
Go through that information. All right, on to the mission statement. Emily, I have yours up.
Oh, right.
To provide recommendations to the county council and city administration for creating economic prosperity in the city, going out and developing, supporting, and nurturing relationships with current businesses and stakeholders, creating initiatives and tactics to attract new businesses and citizens, fostering growth within our community by enabling these ventures to thrive. Loved it.
So,
Very close to where I was at. I'd actually was honing in on the same thing about how can we take care of our existing local businesses.
right,
Mine was to support and expand existing local businesses with job creation and market share while attracting new businesses by identifying our assets and liabilities, creating public-private partnerships which produce investment into and within the city of Oneonta, New York, improving the quality of life through the enhancement of modes of transportation, community green space, and Fridays after that. I think we also should be mentioning our workforce. I know that Otsego Now a few years ago did a workforce development program. I don't think that the program is up and running now,
okay,
but identifying our workforce will help when existing businesses want to expand. Will they know that the workforce is there? And then if you're trying to attract new businesses, what is your workforce?
right. Yeah, I guess like for like larger businesses, right? You know, like smaller businesses might,
Even smaller.
but even
ones.
small businesses, yeah.
Local contractors, when I go around and I talk to local contractors, it's hard for them to find someone that'll just come 5 days a week.
It's hot, yeah, you know.
It's so
it is.
difficult to find that reliable workforce.
Definitely.
So just in the contractor field, they're frustrated with that. Food service, same way. Just having folks show up.
Right, who are reliable, who are gonna steal from you.
Right, so,
I mean, so I've been thinking a lot about this, and I don't know where we want this conversation to go.
no, I think it should be
You know,
just open for ideas.
I think a big, you know, I'm looking at Oneonta, and, you know, half of our population is a transient population. You know?
Right.
You know, that requires a lot of support for the city, you know. So I don't know, just kind of looking at that, and then I've been kind of on this thing of like homeowners and property owners, you know, that are here, like pay, you know, pay all the taxes for, you know, for everybody, but they're half the population, you know.
Plus-
So I don't know, I mean, I would just love, I think it would entice people to come here if we could somehow lower the cost of living. And I don't know how we get to that, but I think then you entice people to come in, and then you stimulate more money in the economy. And so that's why I passed around that article about how that one city in Texas, they eliminated property taxes by increasing sales taxes.
And they increase sales taxes by attracting and recruiting and retaining businesses. I mean, that list of businesses that they had at the bottom of their website, very impressive.
Right.
Right.
And that was, I mean, it was a little bit bigger. Someone also recently told me that Utica did something like that a while ago, only for like a brief period of time. but I couldn't find any information on that, I was looking for that. I think the biggest thing though is that you don't wanna drive business away from the city and drive it over to Southside, right, which is in the town. I mean, what if the city annexed Southside and made it part of our city?
I don't know if they would be down with
If who wouldn't be down with it?
The
town.
that. The town.
But before we get to that point,
Right.
do you think we ought to, like the housing commission looking at vacant property where Joan Fox had identified, Steve, you were there that night, wasn't it 41 acre parcels?
She said she located 40, at least 41 1-acre privately owned parcels.
Which to me was mind boggling that she was able to find them, which is great, because our codes restrictive to that point, so if the geography allowed it to happen, we would say in a 1 acre parcel, we would want at least 2 homes, if not 3, if the geography would allow. I mean, we are the city of the hills. But do our codes restrict that from happening?
Oh.
So that's, that's one of our initiatives, is thankfully with Steve being very progressive with our codes, we don't have to look at and identify what restrictions we're having with code enforcement. And then later on, I did want to talk to you about the process of permitting, if we get to it tonight, okay? So infilling of parcels for neighborhood services.
Okay.
Infilling of living space. I think, Steve, you have something on the books. In certain zones, we can do accessory dwelling units, right, ADUs?
So we just updated the downtown code to allow accessory dwelling units of all types. The larger zoning code restricts accessory dwelling units to like home health care type uses. But I've advised the mayor and the housing commission that simply removing those restrictions would be an easy way to create a much more additional housing with minimal, you just be changing it to where you could use those for any type of dwelling, not just home health care related, family taking care of mom, dad.
Right.
Because right now that's what it's restricted to in everything outside of downtown.
Okay.
So the MU1 zone allows accessory dwelling units of any type. Outside of the MU1, we still are using the old 2013 code, which specifies that if you have an ADU, it's because you're taking care of parents, or parents are letting their kids live there, or it has to be family or like medically related, which would just be a simple change of the existing code.
Right.
I see. So you mean like if they have like a little like apartment thing in there?
So if you look, there's like a lot of really big old carriage houses.
Yeah.
There's a couple, like there's one on Elm Street that's, basically a 2-story. It's bigger than some small houses. You could convert that into a dwelling unit and house someone there. But our current code says that person either has to be related or they have to be providing medical care to the primary occupant of the property.
I see. So now that's no longer.
So if we were to remove that restriction, you could then use that building for
income. You
can create housing, you
Yeah.
can create income. Also, a lot of the drawback on these large like carriage properties is the maintenance required is higher than the value of having a 2-story hay lofted, stable or something.
Right.
So a lot of people tear them down and then just let them fall into disrepair because there's no real use. Like you don't have 6 horses anymore in a carriage so they just kind of collapse.
Yeah.
So we get a lot of them torn down because the cost to maintain them exceeds the value of having.
Is there a required lot size to have an ADU?
So our code right now has some weird restrictions on like lot sizes and setbacks, like I would recommend you just would remove those when you altered that ADU code. Because again, it's just kind of a weird. We have a lot of, I don't want to say arbitrary, but a lot of arbitrary zoning standards like lot size and setback. We did a mapping project where we basically identified that a majority of the residential zones in the city are non-conforming in setback and lot size. So we have entire neighborhoods that are zoned for 20-foot setbacks and 6,000 square foot lots that have 4-foot setbacks and, you know, 5,100 square foot lots, 4,000 square foot lots. So when you have that, you inherently are creating non-conformity, which then hamstrings. Like if I were to build something, I didn't have to get a zoning variance because I have a non-conforming parcel, setback, you know, I don't meet the zoning standard because the zoning standard was written after the houses were built. So it's kind of a weird chicken and the egg. We created zoning that didn't match what we had, basically.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's really, I think that's cool about the accessory dwelling units, you know, someone could pop a little tiny house in their backyard and.
And the state of New York is moving towards requiring that anyway. So the state of New York is working on legislation that would mandate that ADUs are basically required. Well, you can't restrict ADUs to kind of what we have. So it's coming down anyway. So I don't see why we wouldn't get ahead of it by just regulating ourselves, because it's kind of a best practices now. A lot of progressive cities are doing ADUs just a by right zoning use.
Right, instead of making a restriction of a medical need of some sort.
Which is why when we redid the MU1, we allow for accessory dwelling units.
And then are we requiring a certain size on the ADUs?
State code.
What is the size of an ADU? What are they regulating
So
at?
what the state would say with an ADU, they would regulate it just like any other residential use. So there's square footage requirements for like eating areas, bedrooms. Yeah, so it would just meet that. I mean, the only definition that we provided in the updated MU1 code is that the accessory use be primarily secondary to the primary use on the parcel. So if you have a 2-story house that's 900 or we'll say 1,800 square feet, you couldn't build a 4,000 square foot ADU because it would clearly not be subordinate to the primary use.
Okay.
But if you were like, I have an 1,800 square foot house, I'd like to construct a 600 square foot ADU, you could make that argument easily. So it basically just, you have to show that it's a secondary use of the property.
Right, so but before we get over our ski tips, do you think that you should be kind of creating or scoping that out now though? I mean, before we say we want to move forward to being a little bit more progressive, you would guide that conversation.
Yeah,
we want the real setbacks for an ADU would be, it has to be 1/3 the size of the home or whatever.
Yeah, so if we were getting into like residential zones, what we have right now is primarily in our downtown. So you've got like 5-story, 4-story buildings. You don't have a ton of opportunity to build ADUs. Before we were to move into like the residential zones, we would draft up legislation that would outline what we wanted to see as an ADU. We obviously wouldn't just be like, do whatever you want. So yeah, that would be part of that process, would be drafting the legislation, putting it to the legislative body. They would review it. No, that's part of that process.
I guess you change phones. I just flipped mine over and I don't know if you identified the number.
Yeah, that's
64330.
gonna be like, for sure.
Yeah, I just flipped it over.
Sorry about that. It's okay. Sounds like I missed some.
We're still hashing out ideas of the mission statement.
Okay,
We're on the subject matter of ADUs or accessory dwelling units, and Steve was just kind of part of the conversation of what the framework of that look like. We had read aloud Emily's
Oh, great.
suggestion for our mission statement, and then I had thrown mine out there also.
Is it different?
It's a little
A little
different. I mean, I'm fine with either one, you know.
I
I
it
think
should
they
be
both kind of have the
mix.
general idea,
Yeah.
you know.
A mixture of both. And then we were just kind of throwing ideas out there. I definitely want to have quality of life within the mission statement. I think it's important for us to talk about quality of life, which, you know, should include what I wrote down is modes of transportation. So if we want to talk about having a smart city, having a walkability, bikeability, you know, that's your modes of transportation. So I would like that included. If we want to talk about green space, we're very fortunate in our city that we have multiple parks creating green space for us, but you know, in the Arts Commission, I think that's important that we keep moving forward, seeing what people's ideas for art, introducing murals and art, forms of art within the community. And then Emily brought up, you know, lowering the cost of living here. Did you get a chance to read that email that she sent to us? And that's a nice little city down in Texas. It
Yeah.
just takes a lot of marketing to get there.
Yeah, and I mean, that, like,
No, but it's
obviously,
starting
like, we're not gonna,
to-
like, be
No.
able to do that right, you know, I mean, right away, like, that's something that's, you know, it's very complicated, require a lot of
Right.
logistics.
Yeah.
Right.
But I don't know, I just, looking at ways that we can, I don't know, like, maybe it's a small piece of a larger puzzle.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's worth exploring. That's what we're here to do, right? Is generate ideas. One thing that I know has been brought up before and was kind of, I don't know, dismissed by previous administrations is a land value tax, land use tax. I know that there was an organization that had reached out to us last year via email, and I can try to find it, about like doing a presentation on the benefits of that. I think that there's some like home rule, and with your suggestion as well, I think there's some like home rule legislation that needs to be passed first, and I think it's something that we need to advocate for at the state level. That's sort of beyond my depth of understanding, but I think that it's worth, you know, I think we're here to do things, innovative things, and investigate those innovative ideas to see if they're for the benefit of the community. And so I think that it'd be worth, you know, pulling in people who can explain to us a little bit more about those scenarios and like what we would need to do in order to, you know, move forward with that. And obviously taking into account our finance department and understanding what the impact of that would be to our city finances. But I agree that cost of living is, you know, I think probably the number one reason why people, that coupled with housing, right, is sort of the number one reason why people don't live within the city.
Right,
They'll buy a house in the town or Milford or
well,
Unadilla.
exactly, like even people that I know who have moved back to the area are not buying houses in Oneonta, they're not living in the city of Oneonta, they're moving to Okivo, they're moving, you know.
Yep.
And
Because of the taxes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, just cost of living in general.
So that's number one to them, rather than the quality of life and all the other assets that we have here. That's the
I
number
mean,
one
I
liability.
mean, you have to, you know, there's not a lot of jobs here that pay very much money, you know, I mean. I have a pretty well-paying job for the area, and it's still not even as much money as $80.
Yeah.
So,
And I think, sorry, if I can just jump in, Lynn, to your question, I think you can take advantage of our quality of life and not be a resident of the city. And which is good, and you know, that's not something that we necessarily, I'm not trying to say like, oh, we should do something about that, but like, I think that that's not as much of a counterbalance, right? Because you can still experience like our great parks and come to our downtown and things, and you know, in that way, we're getting sales tax. So to Emily's point about the tax structure, right, we do benefit from that. But yeah, without paying like city property taxes, city water and sewer, and if you just, it's all, I mean, it all comes down to money, right?
Right.
So if you can figure out, you know, that it's gonna be cheaper for you to buy fuel oil and have septic tank and whatever in, you know, the village of Unadilla, then if you can still, if it's a 20-minute commute down the highway to Oneonta, which is great, and something that I think, you know, is why we exist, right? Then yeah, people just ultimately have to do what's best for their pocketbooks. So
So we counter that,
who is a pocketbooks like him?
so we counter that
Okay,
So
sorry, yeah.
we counter that liability with creating an opportunity, an environment that says we're open for business and work with existing businesses for more job creations and attract new businesses.
Yeah, I mean, even if you work here, though, it's easy enough to live in a surrounding town. I think what we need to do in terms of, you know, really rehabbing the city is figure out a way to get people to live here.
Mhm. And so that was kind of my, sorry to keep bringing up the sales tax thing, but like, if there's a higher sales tax, like who is paying that higher sales tax? It's college students that live here that don't pay taxes, and it's tourists that come here. It's people from the outside that are generating that money. And then if people have lower property taxes, now they're taking that money and putting it into renovating their home. Like maybe we can come up with some kind of tax incentive if you put money into your home and make it nicer, that, you know. But but it's, I know that it's like really complicated.
Glad to hear you say that, because that's why I revitalized that tax initiative.
That's what was laid on our desk.
That's what's laid on your
Yeah.
desk, so that, you know, if you spend more than 10,000, 30,000 for the number, that's not like me, but to invest in your property, then you get a tax incentive from that mark up. You know, not what you're paying now, but from that new investment up, you get a tax incentive.
Right.
And that was
right.
legislation that was created by Mayor Miller and Dave Risper and I think
Right,
John.
that your property's not gonna be reassessed, so your taxes aren't gonna go up if you make an improvement.
Right.
What I'm talking about though is like right now, it's very difficult for people to pay bills, you know, like we
Yes.
just went through COVID, so businesses have really suffered, a lot of people suffered from that.
Mhm.
And then we have very high inflation, as we all know, you know, and every year the cost of living goes up, you know. And I understand the reason why, but I feel like if the cost of living here is the same as it is in another town, I mean, I feel like that could be a great advantage to us if we can to entice people.
Mhm.
You know, why are there cool hip coffee shops opening up in Sydney serving avocado toast and not in Oneonta? It's probably because it's cheap to buy things in Sydney.
Right.
You
The
know?
tax rate as well.
Is the tax rate?
I know, that's a good
I was
question, right?
actually
Know
gonna
that.
ask Jenny, sorry, not
Sorry.
fair. Don't wing it if you don't feel
What's the
comfortable,
tax rate of?
but our tax rate per thousand compared to other municipalities within our county, how do we do?
I don't have that right off the top of my head, but I can put a report together to supply it to you. I do know that Sydney at one point had a higher tax rate than Oneonta, but I don't know if that's still the case.
Huh.
So, but I.
I don't want to generate more work.
I mean, this was totally
But no,
hypothetical
it's
too, so
not-
I'm kind of.
Yeah, it's not hard.
Judy, you can help us?
Not on the tax rate, but I can on the water and sewer fees. I was just doing some math, so if somebody builds a house in the town, their septic system is gonna be at least 15 grand if their perk is halfway decent.
I can tell you, it's gonna be more like 25,000.
Yeah, because you gotta do an engineering, right?
Yeah, well, not only do you have to do an engineering, but it was 25,000, yeah,
So even at 15 grand, if you divide that by a typical house here in the city at $300 a year, you're talking 50 years before that's paid off based on what they're paying here. And your water, a typical well is probably around 8 grand.
Ooh,
If you
no.
hit, is it higher?
Yeah.
So the reason I no longer live in Franklin is because I got sick of chasing around water and sewer there. a well for my property there was $15,000.
Okay, so you're in the same ballpark as the sewer, 50-year
So if you
payback.
just said 30,000, just in your numbers, 30,000 for water and sewer.
And it costs about 600 here for an average house, a typical house, I'd say. So, the other thing is with our water and sewer fees, the controller's office, you've probably heard this before, but the controller's office comes out every year with cost thresholds for water districts and sewer districts. Those numbers are based on actual sewer and water district creations in prior years. The controller's office comes up with these figures every single year and they change. The threshold for what's considered an affordable water and sewer district are in the $800 and $900 range each. And that's considered affordable by the New York State Controller when you're creating a water district in a town. If you're under that amount for a typical household, you only need to do a public hearing for your district and you don't need to go through a whole application with the controller because they consider that affordable. So that's what other places throughout the New York State are paying typically in a year in a town water or sewer district. It's $800 to $900 each for water and sewer. We're at the $300 to $400 range here. So that's something we should be marketing.
Yeah.
Because when you're talking
Yeah,
about
that
water and
sounds like a
sewer
marketing
fees,
problem.
we're like rock bottom and we're providing really good resources with our water and sewer.
And if you
So-
take our water and sewer annual bill, say it was $600 annually, divide by 12. It's $50 a month. And
Correct.
when you compare that to cable bills or cell phone bills or.
Or even water bills. I was living in an apartment and I paid to a third party water and it was like $45 a month.
Right,
And that felt, this is why I'm such a big advocate for like monthly. I'm so excited we're gonna do quarterly billing. Because I think, when you chunk it out like that, it feels much more manageable than when you get like a
Right.
$400 bill and you're like,
Yeah.
oh no.
And this is
Yeah,
where
and so-
people are complaining, I've asked
Yeah.
them out there on the public, they're just upset, they're actually mad that we sent them that water and sewer bill right after we sent them the property tax bill. And the fall, they got the school, yeah, it's that timing, that month difference, and
well, but also, but the due date did not change. So we sent them the bill, but the due date still is April 30th. So what it did is it just gave them a longer period of time to pay it without penalty. And also, I can't tell you how many people love having it. We have gotten so many water and sewer payments already because, it goes on both sides. Many people, we were having people call us in February, I haven't got my water bill yet, where is it?
right, those are the people
So-
that budget for them,
Yeah.
but I don't agree with you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people out there.
I mean, I know it's.
that are non-budget.
I know,
But if they know that they're just putting $50 a month away, they do that,
Yeah.
but they get hit with that.
Yeah,
$500
and also, when we get new people coming here and they're registering at, with saying, I just bought this house, what are the tax due dates, what are the water due dates, and what's the average water bill, and I tell them, and they'll say, well, that's per month. And I'm like, no, that's per year, you're kidding. Where I came from, I was paying that per month.
Right.
So they're just astonished at how low our water and sewer bills are.
So, so continuing on, I think we need to do two things with educating the public about those types of fees and where they are compared to others. You can always find communities that might charge less, but you have to look at their system to see how up to date those systems are, because they could be way behind where we're at. But I think there's two components to the education with the consumer. It's your current costs are very, very reasonable compared to other places in the state. That's one. And number two is, and in order to keep our systems up to date where they need to be, we're going to continue to raise the rates so that we have the money to be able to do that. Because these other systems that are paying $800, their users are paying $800 to $900 per year, they might be completely up to date. And that's the cost of having a brand new system or a system that's been brought completely up to date. And we're not there yet. Right. So there's two components, we're really low, but we also need to continue to get those rates up so that we can afford what it costs to really have a very viable water and sewer system.
We deliver a great tasting product.
And as you know, through the budget meetings,
You do.
And through the budget
We do
meetings,
not.
we have presented to you through Waterworth that how much, we've got $6 to $8 million of infrastructure that we need to take care of.
Correct.
Right, that was really eye-opening for me.
Right,
It was like,
and-
okay, we have to do this. And it's not
Yeah.
us saying
Mhm.
like, oh, we want, it's like, it literally hasn't been done up until this
It has
point,
not,
so-
right, and just keep postponing it, we cannot postpone it any longer.
Right, it will be in a really dire
Right,
situation.
and I also think that in one of the presentations I showed you, that the sewer rates were not raised for a matter of 4 to 5 years.
Mhm.
So in 2014, we were getting the exact same revenue as we got in 2018 or 19, but our costs did not stay that way.
And you never did.
So that's why the slow and steady approach, I think, is a good approach to look at it, saying that we don't want to go out to the public and say, oh, we have to raise your rates 25%.
Right.
It's,
I'm
it's
sure,
too big of a hit at once.
I'm sure you're enduring phone calls and conversations, and you are now also, where the public's come up and they're complaining about the water and sewer bill, and I instantly turn and go, you should not complain about your water and sewer bill. One, it's a great tasting product, and number two, except for the water out, our costs are much lower than what? There was only one other community in 3 counties that is less than us. That's not necessarily something to be proud of, because we haven't saved enough money to pay for the infrastructure. I mean, we have so many pipes in the ground that are 100, 110 years old,
Right.
and that need to be replaced.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at.
Our
the
city
one on
staff are
River
running
Street.
around fixing water main breaks all the time.
All the
You guys are
time.
Oh, I know, I mean, the Nixel,
Like every other day. It's like,
Nixel makes me
oh.
feel so popular.
So that proves to you that we need to be more
Mhm.
aggressive in getting money generated to pay for our expenses.
And water and sewer services, I think, is a benefit to entice people to come to Oneonta. Because as, you know, I can endorse it myself, and Stephen just did, to maintain a well and a septic is extremely expensive.
Mhm.
I mean, that's just the initial cost. There's a lot of costs to go with septic systems if you don't maintain them.
And then also there's the constant, you know, are they being contaminated?
Correct. Yeah, as your neighbors, whatever, leak into your water table, because that happens.
Right.
Okay, good stuff. Definitely. Judy, could you send that link that you just mentioned about the water and sewer
Yeah, thank you
rates?
for that.
Sure. I'll do it right now.
And Judy, did you mention in your presentation, I apologize if I missed it, that sometimes we get denied grants because our rates are not high enough?
No, I didn't mention that.
So,
So can I just add something? I want to be careful how I say this too, because it has to do with the public, but where I worked before, I worked for an engineer and I managed huge wastewater projects in the New York City watershed that were 100% funded by the New York City Department of Environmental Protection. And the fees were subsidized by the city such that a homeowner for brand new wastewater systems, a community-wide wastewater system, homeowners paid $100 a year. And after the third, $100 a year, and after the third year, that $100 increased by the rate of inflation, so like 3% a year after that. And you know, we had complaints that was too expensive. So everybody always has a perception that their water and sewer rates are super high, even when they're $100 a year. So I just wanted to point that out. Sometimes you have to really educate the public on what's involved, like, you know, I don't think I've seen the asset management plan on our water and sewer, so I don't know exactly how much these systems would be if we had to install a new one, but it's in the tens of millions plus for each system. So it's like, you know, you're paying hundreds. So you're paying, you know, $300 or $400 a year for multi-million dollar systems. Yeah.
And also,
So
It's just
less than 500
education.
bucks, but we're also not, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're not at the 50% capacity yet for both water and sewer, correct?
you're right.
So our forefathers had good vision, and so now it's our opportunity to capitalize on that.
And then if you take the total bill that they're paying, that's for both services, so
Correct.
separate that out,
Mhm.
right?
Right,
So the minimum bill for water is 240, I want to say 200,
Just for easy math, say 250.
Yeah, say
It's less than
$250.
$500, it's so close to
Yeah.
500.
Yeah, and just divide that by 12.
It's a
I
steal.
mean, the entire price is like $468. It's like a minimum.
478 is. what-
478.
Yeah.
You've never been able to go over to a retail store and buy a gallon of water for what you go to your faucet and buy a gallon of water from the city of Lynn.
So it's less than $40 a month for both services. Just divide that by 2. It's less than $20 a month for your water. It's a life needing source,
Mhm.
and it's $20, less than $20 a month.
So just to clarify, the controller's thresholds are sewer 706 a year and water 989.
Wow.
Like $1,600.
That's for upstate New York?
Yeah. That covers the whole state.
I would have never.
Yes, but, so their numbers are for districts that have been either created or expanded, where their costs have changed and they've had to report to the controller within, I'm not sure if it's the prior year or the year before, but these are based on actual numbers that they come up with. So, yeah, I'll send you this link.
So cost of living is a liability. Katie, what do you have for a liability?
I think, we might be reinventing the wheel a little bit because the Survive and Thrive committee, one of the infrastructure committee for that already did like a lot of that work. And we might actually have our email somewhere, the asset and liability list. Judy, I know you've seen it.
Yeah, I have seen it. I was trying to find it and I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
It's also in the comprehensive plan,
Oh, yeah.
because for a comprehensive plan, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, those things are mandated to be in there.
Yeah, there's a whole,
So,
there's a list of goals or things that were identified during the comprehensive plan process with recommended kind of action steps.
Okay.
yeah, but the list Katie's talking about, the committee actually came up with barriers to accomplishing.
Oh, that's
Right,
right.
wasn't that asset, and
Yeah.
that was basically where we have the strengths and where we have limitations, to meet the, basically for the marketing thing, it was the housing was a big issue.
Yeah,
But
right.
yeah, it identified all the current stuff as of 2020. And I tried to find it and I found a draft, but I didn't find the final one.
I don't remember seeing this.
I don't think you did. It went to
It
the-
sounds like,
it went from the infrastructure committee with the Survive and Thrive effort to the marketing committee. And the marketing committee included it to determine what we could do with the marketing and what that committee could do.
you're on the market?
This is back in 2020. And I don't think we've really discussed it since then.
I mean, I remember looking at it and then like filing it.
So, yeah, to your point, I mean, let's not create the will.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would say, and I was late, so I apologize if this is kind of a double dutch statement, but, is, I think that our mission statement should be pretty broad, because, these are things that we wanna look into and address. But I think overall, sort of this is gonna be like a long-standing committee, and I hope that it is. I think that the more, what I've learned, because I'm naturally a very specific person, but is that like the more broad, more general the mission statement is, the easier it is to sort of stay true to that purpose and on an ongoing basis. So
Right.
that would be my feedback.
Emily brought up a good way of looking at it is kind of identifying the tasks or goals. Right, that was your thought process, tasks or goals. Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it.
So like specific goals, because that's kind of the opposite.
Right, so
Yeah.
looking at
So not
off the
specific
mission
goals,
statements, yeah, don't go so far down in the weeds that everything's listed in the mission statement,
Uh-huh,
but put that in the tasks or goals, whatever you want to call it.
yeah, I mean, I like the one that you sent. I'm not sure what the conversation around that was, but I thought that it was pretty good, and then I missed yours, so I'm not sure what that. The one I had sent initially was like very broad, just like who we are and what we're gonna do.
Right.
I guess we can drill down like as tightly as you guys want to, but that would be my hesitation with that, is that like, saying that we're gonna address or identify specific things rather than like the broader mission and what we want to accomplish.
Right.
I So where did we land on like your mission statement that you sent us, which I thought was very well worded, versus like integrating some of what, and again, I'm on holidays, I missed yours, so I don't know what it's at. Do you want to read it?
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
To support and expand existing local businesses with job creations and market share while attracting new businesses by identifying our assets and liabilities, creating public-private partnerships which produce investment into and within the city of Oneonta, improving the quality of life through the enhancement of multi-transportation, community and green space, and
Yeah, I would probably just like
Right,
straight through that.
I think, I like where you're going, because that is like, those are the things that we are going to do, but maybe like get rid of those specifics with about green space and this. We're gonna support our businesses, attract new growth.
we lead just as quality of life because they are
Improve quality of life.
thoughts of quality of life.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, we're getting close.
Mhm.
And then, topics, we were talking about assets and liabilities, we kind of started that, and then under next steps, I wanted to look at Main Street America.
Okay. Cool. Bear with me just 1 second, because I'm sending you guys, I found an email on the land value tax that I mentioned, like right when I first got here, that has a lot of great resources, thanks to you. So, I just wanted to get that out to you real quick.
Who would be I mean, I guess I can read your article, so, but, who would be affected by that tax?
Land value, so it's like my very like neophyte understanding of it is that it basically taxes the like amount of space that a property takes up versus what is built on that property.
Oh, okay. Would, that's interesting, but, I mean, would it apply to like a nonprofit?
That's a good question that I don't know the answer to.
You know, just, because there are, nonprofit organizations that don't pay into the property tax as well, so.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think you would.
They would.
The land value tax is a structure change, not so much a who gets tax change.
Mm-hmm.
So the value of a land value tax is
If that makes sense.
like, basically, it does not penalize you for doing improvements on property.
I see.
Because your tax structure isn't based on property being improved, it's based on the value of the land that the property sits on.
Right.
So if you have large amounts of empty land, like let's say like the Deep Street parking lot,
Right,
that is a large, low value section of land because there's a parking lot on it. So the tax structure of a land value tax would say, it doesn't matter if there's a structure on it or not. That land is,
it's more parcel
so
based.
the tax value of that land would be the same as like the lot, like the Ford block.
Mm-hmm.
So like they would be paying the same because you're not being taxed on improvements, you're being taxed on the value of the parcel that exists in your municipality.
That's kind of interesting, because like I was thinking about, not to digress too much, but like parking issues downtown, about like, there are residents that live downtown Main Street and don't have a place to park their car. And we do in our city, it is kind of you kind of have to rely on a car unless you take the bus to go get your groceries. A lot of people want to have a car. And I was, I know that it's going to come up more like parking ideas for like metered parking, but I wonder if, as the city talked about, like having, like offering permits, like permit parking. So like someone could buy a permit for the year and then have a parking space near their apartment downtown. But if it,
The parking district.
because at one point I was thinking like, you have like these banks that have these like huge parking lots, and half the time, like, do they really need like 30 parking spaces for people to go to the bank? I don't know, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but maybe it would encourage them to then rent those spaces or give those spaces to the city so that the city can make a profit on
Yeah, so
having paid, or I don't know,
So some of those parking spaces are privately owned. They could charge for parking there if they wanted to. They just obviously choose not to charge for parking there. there's nothing in the code and there's nothing that restricts Community Bank from renting parking spaces if they want.
Right,
I think the part of the problem is when you have a surplus of parking, there's no incentive to rent parking. So Community Bank is like, we have so much available parking that's free. We don't need to rent parking because there's just a ton of it. So we could charge, I mean, charging parking passes or like resident stickers is something that many municipalities have done, and you can do it. I think if you remove some of the surplus of parking that we have, you might start to encourage places like Community Bank to say, we want to charge for parking on our off hours. Like if you look at places like Schenectady, their downtown, many businesses have come up with creative ways to charge for parking on their off hours. Like if the bank is closed, they have metered parking in their parking lot. So yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff. It's just right now we have so much parking that why would anyone pay for it if it's just there?
well, I mean, I know that like tenants in my building, because the parking lot where Hunger's
Right.
Workers used to be, is like a privately owned lot, and it's
Right.
very difficult to get parking passes for
Mhm.
whatever reason, like have asked me like, where do I park? Where can I park my car?
Right.
And so, and I don't think people would be opposed to paying to have.
Yeah, paid parking, like that's why most cities have paid parking.
Mm-hmm.
That's why a lot of cities have moved to a model where they allow residents to buy parking stickers, which exempt them from having to pay meters and having to chase around.
Right, and it could be like based on your address, you know?
Right. So yeah, I mean, those are options.
Anyway, yeah, this is like going into a.
No, it's
different
funny because
place.
it ties into one of the strategic goals for 22 for Ginny and Greg. That was part of their revenue generating goals this year, were to talk about parking, so maybe you're fine.
Okay.
But like, to go back to land value tax, the land value tax would say, like the Westcott lot is another example, like if that was privately owned, it would be taxed very high because it's the same as the Autumn Cafe building next to it. Like it's a large, except the exception would be there's nothing built on it. So you'd be paying a lot of money in taxes with no real return because it's just a parking lot. So the point of a land value tax is to encourage development, because if you're paying the same amount of taxes on a vacant lot as you are on a 5-story building, you're
Right.
incentivized to build a 5-story building, not sit on vacant land.
That's cool.
But it's a major undertaking.
Is there any successful,
No.
my understanding is there's no successful models in
Right.
New York State.
So land value tax is not widely, anywhere. It's not. It's been something that has been thought about since like the 19th century. Like it actually started in New York City. It's like a philosophical like system of taxation. It predates that, but that's kind of where it was credited to. There aren't working models of it in New York State. I think Amsterdam tried it for a little bit and couldn't really make it work.
See, but how cool is that? Like, if Oneonta did something like that, like, that's so cool, you know?
I don't think it could just be Oneonta. I think the county
Yeah, it
and
would have to
school
be-
would also have to be.
I
agreeing to
see.
it.
Right.
Yeah, so it's-
It's a major change. You're changing your
Yeah, a lot of
entire
people
tax
are.
structure.
So I want to ask, what impact would a tax like that have on, like your senior citizens in the big houses on the bigger lots in our city? Would they be having a burden placed on them because their lots are bigger? So their tax rate would be higher?
It would depend on how those parcels were basically structured. So if they were in desirable locations, in theory, their taxes would, ideally, their taxes would stay neutral or slightly go up. But the argument is that if they do improvements on their property, it wouldn't change. So like someone like me, who's doing like a massive, $100,000 remodel of my house, my taxes wouldn't be affected. They would essentially stay flat. And ideally, as neighborhoods improve, your taxes go up because the value of the land increases because it becomes more desirable. But again, like that's all kind of a hypothetical. That's how it would work.
Yeah.
But we don't have any examples of saying, oh, and this is exactly how it works in New York State, because 40 communities have done it.
And this is the unexpected, unintended consequence.
Right.
Right.
So I mean, you could,
Interesting to think about like student rentals, right? Because they're all pretty like densely packed in center city, and often are poorly maintained.
Right.
And so theoretically, taxes on those would go up under that model.
right,
Right. Mm-hmm.
because they would be being taxed. I mean, my house and that house would be taxed at the same rate.
Mhm.
But again, like, you're talking about a major change to the tax structure, so
Not deterred.
like, if you could have them come to a presentation,
Yeah,
but I mean, it's all kind of a theoretical
Right.
process that
Right.
we don't have really any working examples of.
Yeah, right, so,
sure. Yeah, we can talk about it. So Main Street America, I found out about them, I think in my process of, and actually went to sidebar before we start this. I'm really glad that you brought up arts. At some point, I would like to talk about the economic value of art in communities, because it's like statistically proven, and I could have a whole meeting just on that if you'd like. I think that the council really needs to consider funding the Arts Commission, and I think we need to, obviously, we're cash strapped, so we're thinking of creative ways to do that. But that's for another time. So I think that I'm pretty sure that I found Main Street America through that quest of like finding information on folk art. And it's basically it's an organization under the umbrella of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, which is a federally funded program. They do a lot of, actually, I'm probably just gonna let Stephen speak to this because I forwarded the same information that I sent to you to Judy and Stephen, and I got a really, thank you for that really thoughtful response. I did, begin to look into the, think through the parks. Is it through parks? Yes, that you sent me.
CLG,
CLG,
yes.
certified local government.
Yes.
I like barely scratched the surface on that. I'm sure you obviously show, depth of understanding on this program better than I do. But I will say, I spoke to this woman, Hannah, who sent me all this information. They do like a bunch of grants that you are eligible to apply for if you are a member of the organization. They have sort of a proven track record of revitalizing downtown communities. I think a couple of the statistics of note on page 3, it says they have 2,000 programs and they added 583,000, almost 584,000 jobs over those 2,000 programs, which is an average of 291 new jobs in each community. Obviously that varies from community to community. And then I also thought that it was very interesting at the bottom for every dollar of public money, it leveraged $39.75 of private money. Since that's a goal of this commission. The membership for this is like really inexpensive, but there are like tiers to it. And when I spoke to Hannah, she had mentioned that our participation in a DRI initiative had put us in a good position for becoming an accredited community through Main Street America. There is a hiccup, which Stephen identified as well, which is that there's no, and I forget what they call them, but there's no sort of coordinating agency in New York State, which again is like, there's no example of this functioning in your state, which really stinks. But when I spoke to Hannah, she mentioned that you can sort of be advised directly by the organization. So it's not an insurmountable roadblock. It just would be cool if there was one like in Albany, but there isn't. Yeah, so basic membership, so I sent you guys all the links and everything. I don't know if you had a chance to go through any of that stuff, but it's a tiered membership, right? It's very inexpensive by comparison. I think the basic membership is $295. Obviously only if you guys think it's worth it would we want to pursue this. And so I'll just let Stephen speak to the program a little bit if you're willing to do that.
So Main Street America is, like you said, runs from the Preservation League. It is an interesting program that has a lot of really great examples. There's a bunch of them all across the United States. So unlike the land value tax, there are many examples of this program working nationally.
Okay.
In the Northeast, we're kind of weird. It's like New York State, Vermont, and New Hampshire have like none of these programs. But if you go to Scranton, they are a Main Street America program.
Huh.
So like they're right across the border from us. They just are none here. Typically you have what's called a coordinating program, which is like your kind of like your DAD program. Usually they're like located in a major area. So like there'll be one in like Boston, and they kind of coordinate these kind of satellite smaller cities and smaller programs. Like you said, it's not a dead end there, because you can go through the national organization. There's one in Washington, DC. There's one in Chicago. Those kind of act as like the national coordination center. So they can basically oversee a program, even if there isn't a coordinating program within the state. You can become a member, like they're individuals that are members. So like you could join Main Street and be just an individual person that's a member of Main Street America. Then there's like consulting firms. So like a planning firm might become a member because they coordinate or help cities, prepare planning documents. Or what we would be looking at is like there's two tiers. One's called an affiliate and one's an accredited Main Street America program. Basically what they do is they say, until you meet certain standards, you can't brand yourself as a Main Street America program. They restrict like you using their material. And each of those two tiers are basically reviewed. You have to meet certain training standards. You have to be, to get to the highest tier, and I sent you this in the email, what you kind of run into is the accredited one, which is where you can start saying, we are a Main Street America program, and it requires a board of directors. It requires a professional staff person. So I don't think that Main Street America is a bad idea. I think it's a really interesting, good idea. I think what we have though is here in Oneonta, we have a contract with Destination Oneonta. And some of the goals that we see these two groups doing, Main Street America and Destination Oneonta, are somewhat overlapping. Main Street America, to be an accredited program, you're required to show like they call it historic preservation ethic. So you have to be focused on historic preservation, which is why it's run through the preservation league. So you've got like kind of that aspect of it, but a lot of like the economic development and community aspects somewhat overlap with Destination Oneonta.
Mm-hmm.
So where you see these programs working, they're usually run by like, they're made up of like downtown businesses and not-for-profits, and they kind of represent the group that you're already drawing from with Destination Oneonta.
Orbit.
Hmm?
Orbit.
Or the business improvement district.
It's from the ground up,
Yeah, it's a grassroots.
not from the.
Yeah. So
municipal down.
a lot of times what will happen is like municipal governments might be involved or might kind of help organize, but you need a lot of like kind of grassroots. You need a board of directors, you need a professional staff person, you need this organizational structure that exists outside of just the municipal government.
So wrong.
Yeah, basically.
And will and skin in the game and from your business community.
So it's not necessarily bad. It's not something that we couldn't look into further, but it's not something that's entirely run by the government. Like the municipal government isn't driving the truck. We're kind of like riding the passenger seat. So what I said in my email is, and I kind of think is like, if this was something you wanted to pursue, it might be something that like you would say, Destination Oneonta, you have an existing structure that matches kind of what we would be looking at to be a Main Street program.
Mhm.
You have a board of directors, you have a paid staff person, you have this existing body of, invested local businesses, and that might be the structure that you use to move something like this forward in partnership with the city government.
Yeah.
Because that's going to kind of move you more than just trying to start a secondary,
Right,
not competing, but kind of adjacent program.
right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
But But yeah, it's just something to think about, but it is interesting, like, it's weird that we don't have any in New York State, I've always thought that was bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, we're like a little island, it's like us, New Hampshire, Vermont, we're like, and then you go out west and it's like Utah, there's like none, it's like a weird.
Oh.
But there's a swath of them like throughout the South and like kind of the Midwest, it's.
I guess what I'm kind of interested more, I mean, because we do our, like you said, we already have Destination Oneonta kind of doing this one function of it. But like the historic improvement or the renovation, like, what do you, so in order to get, like she was saying, there are grants that you can only get if you're a member of this.
Yeah, so what they're looking at is. They're wanting you to do historic preservation work, basically. They're wanting you to do work that builds off of like Main Street Oneonta's like historic character, and like they're doing like their training is a lot about like how to like repurpose, rehabilitate buildings, how to it's really heavily focused on like the historic preservation aspect or the historic reuse. The economic advantages of doing that.
Right, so what would it require though? Like, so in order to be eligible to apply for those grants, is then you would have to have the board and be accredited?
So there's
the
affiliate level version of this doesn't require that. But it does require basically a grassroots type group that is doing what Main Street America wants as far as like.
I see.
There's training requirements, there's like continuing ed requirements.
It's like, I wonder if like the historical district or the historical society, that's what I meant.
That's what I'm saying, I'm wondering
If they
like,
would be interested in maybe kind of serving some of those roles.
right. So that's what I mean, I think it's not necessarily like a deal breaker, but we would just want to make sure that we have the carrying capacity outside of just City Hall. Like, if this is a just City Hall thing, it's not gonna function how that program wants you to work. Like, they want you to have a lot of buy-in from your community, it's a community-driven effort. So if you look at the successful ones, like, there's one in DC, I think it's H Street. They have a very successful program, but it's very successful because it was driven by the business and the community of that corridor. The government played an adjacent role to that, but it wasn't driven by the government. These programs aren't made to be municipally driven. They all have municipal partners, but they're really, the longevity of these programs is focused on the people actually in that business district coordinating to do projects.
I see.
Which isn't bad, I mean, I think that's good.
Yeah.
Because they're emotionally and physically involved.
Yeah.
It's their home.
Yeah. So I think that's really like and I think that's kind of where the Destination Oneonta part might tie in. Like, you might find that tweaking some of their mission statement or involving some aspects that they're not, focused on, you could start to kind of flesh this out a little bit. But that would be like, again, kind of a.
So for example, the community might do a project on Main Street, would they utilize volunteers in the community then? Right, basically?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I'm saying, some of these things overlap with what Destination Oneonta is doing. So like beautification projects, like neighborhood, public, like seating, dining areas, shared green space, like some of the improvement projects that they're doing and some of the revitalization projects that these communities are doing through this program are very like grassroots driven.
Cool.
So it would be like local businesses kind of getting together to do in conjunction with the municipality, some projects, not us saying to the business community, this is what Oneonta is doing now.
Right, that's super cool, and that reminds me of, I think I brought up before, Sullivan County Renaissance, have you heard of that? But they have a lot of I think there's a pretty big private donor that generates most of the money for that, but people do, they go around the community and they look and they see if there's a house that maybe needs some flowers planted and needs a gift shop, and then they.
So that was built off of Oswego.
Oh.
They did a major Renaissance, like community focused. They got together, formed an organization, like they solicit grants but it actually grew up into a big, a program like that, where they actually fund their own, they pick 5 houses, they pick businesses, and they do that type of work. But again, it's that one's entirely outside of government. That's
Right.
run by
Right.
a grassroots organization, funded the whole 9 yards through their own financial grants, hunting. It's not a municipal project.
Katie, there's some of a foundation there, so that's something that you want to keep working with Steve and Julianne, having conversations. and
I
maybe-
mean, if that's okay with you guys, I think, thinking about Destination Oleana and what they're trying to do, like, obviously it would be completely up to them, but I think having those resources for downtown revitalization would be helpful to them, so we can see if they're open to that.
I mean, I would just be curious to see, like, because they overlap so much, like, how, like, I don't see where you could have 2 organizations congruently operating that are attempting to do the same thing.
Yeah, that makes sense,
Like, that's kind of
right,
one's gonna always hamstring the other, I think.
totally.
Well, you could possibly do this if you had a bid. You
Right.
could do it where the bid headed up the Main Street program and they could hire Delaware or
Destination.
Destination Oleana, sorry, for, events and programming and
Yeah.
marketing and stuff like
Right.
that. So
I think it
that
depends
could
on like
work, I
Right.
think.
where they wanna go.
But I don't think I don't think we could have another organization that's like ADO or a Main Street organization.
Right.
I think it would have to take the form of a bid, because that allows the downtown businesses in the bid a whole lot more that they could be working on as well. So they could solve some of their own problems that they have.
Yeah,
So like one of the things we talked about would be like maybe like a paid parking district downtown
Mhm.
would help fund this bid program
Mm-hmm.
so that they could draw funds off of the paid parking to do specific Main Street improvements like plantings, improved parking, sidewalks. Like those are the kind of things you would do with a bid, and that would kind of curtail into what Main Street programs are doing all across America.
But like a bid also, outside of the Main Street program, a bid would also allow them to do things like the stuff that Schenectady bid has done. I mean, if you think back Schenectady 20 years ago compared to Schenectady today,
Right,
most of that's because of their bid.
Mhm.
And the bid is driven by the downtown businesses.
right.
They're fully invested in it. They're able to get grants through the bid. So they're able to fund projects that they want to do as well, and initiatives that they want to do outside of city government. So
Another, if a really great bid to look at is Lark Street in Albany. They actually have a website, Lark Street
Yeah.
Bid. They've actually funded their own like planning documents, like they're funding like their entire corridor sector. They funded off their bid. So they had like parking studies, traffic studies, zoning study.
garbage.
Yeah, garbage removal stuff.
Solving their
It's
garbage issues.
like they're almost operating as like an independent government on their own.
wow.
Cool.
So like, and they have a website. You can
Larkstreetbid.org.
You said large.
large.
Lark.
Yeah.
And check out Schenectady too, because that whole renaissance of downtown Schenectady is linked directly to the bid, from Proctor's coming back live. They had their own organization, but they were completely tied into what was happening with the bid as well.
And so that's a good point, that potentially the Friends of the Oleana Theater.
Yes.
could get
Yes.
involved with that.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of resources for the bid. I mean, you mentioned the Historic Society. They're tied in as well with the Oleana Theater work, with Friends of Oleana Theater. There's a lot of resources, but it has to come from the local businesses. It's not just that they live here, but the future of their businesses are dependent on their success. And if they can have this organization and, this tool to progress further, it's just gonna help their bottom line.
I will put what you put down for mission statement, what you put down, what I put down, I'll just kind of on a little bit. I'll send it to you an email, and we'll just keep playing with it for our next meeting.
Sounds good.
Judy, are we in need of looking at grants or anything from this committee standpoint? In your office, should we be looking at different types of grants for economic development?
Well, it depends on what you are trying to accomplish. I think what I've been looking for a few years when you guys talk about economic development is what are you looking for? What do you want to do?
Right.
So when I kind of know what your aim is, then I could help answer that question. So right now, I mean, I know what's available and what we're going after. So, just, the new micro enterprise program went out today.
Mhm.
If a business comes to me and they are looking for funding, I help them with the community development block grants, small business and economic development programs like the Social Eats Project. There's some other projects or grants that we're looking at to get more funding for some of our ongoing projects. But if you have, so it's just like, that's such a general question, like, so.
Well, I probably could help you
Yeah.
along a little bit. If you guys disagree, please chime in. But I look at this a couple of different ways. So growth would be expanding the population or the geographical footprint of the city. We kind of limited on both right now. Our mayor has a goal of getting 1,000 employed people here. So that would be the growth aspect of it. But as I put in my thoughts for a mission statement is that I'm looking at economic development for those that want to make an investment, right? So you're talking about bid, and I see how your body lights up about the businesses. It's in their invested interest to go towards a business industrial district. That's what I'm looking for is folks that want to invest in our community. Let's go back to our financial director. She pointed out in her speech at the end of the year is that we need to increase our tax base and how we're going to do that.
Mhm.
So we want to reward people that want to invest in the city, which creates that opportunity to bring growth factor up. So I hope that answers your question. So
Yes.
if there's something out there that helps us help somebody that wants to make an investment.
Yeah, and that's what we do. So when, when there's a proposed project that somebody comes to me with, I fit them to what opportunities are out there. And when that happens, if it's a type of project that we need to get Otsego Now involved in with their resources and the chamber with any of their resources, we sit down at the table and we together and with the business owner or the developer, and we figure out what their project is and what funding it can fit. To just go out and look for funding, or if we build it, they will come. That doesn't happen anymore. So it's a specific. If we know there's a developer with an idea, then we get on board to try to help them flesh that idea out. A lot of times the developers who are experienced already have their team. So they're coming in with their grant people, they're coming in with their engineers and architects who have done this before. And then we become an assistant to them. We help them because they're actually pushing, to get their own finances, and we can help with some grants, but they're driving the bus. And then if we get somebody that is not experienced, we explain to them they need to do that.
Right.
They need to develop their team. We become part of their team, but we're not leading the effort on getting them funding because they need to have private funding, bank funding. There are certain grants that they have to apply for directly that we can't do for them. And then there's grants that we can apply for on their behalf. So it becomes a team and a partnership. But
Sure.
yeah, so
I
I
just
kind
want
of,
to make sure that we're not behind the 8 ball on our infrastructure. So if there's something that you guys are identifying as city staff that you're saying, well, if we could tweak this a little bit more, this would make it more enticing for a business to come here, whether it's having, a totally wireless system downtown, or you guys heard me talk about a little bit about our school system as a 10G system. Why couldn't we have something like that in downtown, and then entrepreneurs and local businesses could tap off of that, whatever part they want? I just want to make sure that We're not being reactive. Because you're right, we could sit and wait until somebody comes to us and then talk about specifics, but I'd rather be more aggressive in trying to identify locations in the city of Oneonta that we need to build up the infrastructure to make it more creative.
Yeah, we were at meetings when you said that is on our list. We have a list as long as my arm of, it's not just necessarily just everything on the capital plan, but it's things that we're thinking about that are coming up that we know we need to address relative to infrastructure. And we're trying to identify the right funding as the funding comes up. There's very limited opportunities today, but hopefully this federal funding will come out and it'll open up some other opportunities for us. So we've got a list.
Well, and not to beat a dead horse on this historic preservation thing, but I'm going to. Our entire downtown is in a National Register district, which means every building basically in our downtown is eligible for very large tax credits for approved work. So we have the Brazils building and we have the Stevens Hardware building that both were redeveloped using substantial tax credits because of their National Register designation.
And because of their savvy developer,
Well, yeah, but
he knew about the tax credits.
those tax credits are available to anyone. Springbrook's using them to do the Ford building. Anyone redeveloping, reusing, as long as they're in compliance with the standards provided by the National Park Service, are eligible for large tax credits.
What about for like upkeep of buildings as well, like,
There's
someone had to put a roof, like fix a roof
So
or
it's-
had,
what happens, SHPO reviews applications for those credits. Otsego, what is that, Otsego Now? 2000. They'll actually assist property owners in reviewing those tax credit applications. So SHPO reviews basically your scope of work and they approve it or deny it. But things like roofing are eligible for credits. But it's typically a case by case, they review each one. But I mean, that's a major thing that we don't have people taking advantage of, whereas Buffalo is exploding with people taking advantage of those credits. Like I talked to someone from SHPO and they were like, most of our applications are coming out of Buffalo. They're being swamped with people doing work in Buffalo.
Who's educating the homeowners and the building owners on that? Where's that coming from? How do they know?
I don't know.
In Buffalo?
Well, Buffalo, I mean, so Buffalo rewrote their zoning code. And they won a bunch of awards for it because it was awesome, it's great. And they've been very aggressive in marketing that new code and their historic
Well, they
districts.
also got a $50 million DRI.
Right, yeah, so I mean,
So I'm sure they have more staff than.
well, no, I'm not saying.
No, I'm curious, like, was that part of their DRI, I wonder, to do that education component? Because that's the part of it that you need.
Right.
And how do you do that when you have limited
Funds and
resources?
sources.
Yeah.
Ginny, you had something you wanted to
I
add.
just, is it okay? Yeah. I just want to let the community know that historically, the city has helped Main Street and downtown businesses by millions and millions of dollars. So since my tenure here, we have assisted so many business owners. So I don't want you to think that the city has in any way lessened or not taking advantage of all of the grants that we have been able to get for the downtown. And I'm saying millions of dollars that we have provided. And Judy is now on number 7 for the micro enterprise.
Number 7, yeah.
Yeah, they're 200,000 apiece. And she's on number 7. They've all been very successful. And so I just want you to know, historically, if you were to go back and look at our community development activity, just even over the past 10 years, you would see that we have granted millions of dollars to homeowners and business owners. The second thing, I also wanted to ask, are there any questions on the email that I sent out on the sales tax? Does anybody have any questions, or was I pretty clear in my explanation?
That was pretty clear. I think one thing that it would be remiss if we didn't bring up and potentially explore at some point is something that you mentioned in your email, which is merging with the town.
Well, that has been something that has been talked about
A
several
lot.
times over the years. I will tell you, the
It's
current
very
supervisor
important.
is totally against it.
I'm sorry.
I will tell you that the current town supervisor is totally against it. So, you know, but I'm not saying that it's not something that's worth.
Yeah, right, like our job is to explore stuff and figure out if it's.
And then the other thing that I wanted to stress to the committee, and I know that Len and both Katie have heard me say this before, but when you talk about the colleges, if anything was proven during COVID, is how much the college's activity benefits Oneonta. I think it was proved for every fund within the Oneonta, the general, the water, the sewer, the EPT fund. If we did not have the colleges and the jobs that they bring, the students that they bring, the visitors that they bring, all of the people from other countries that come here to Oneonta, I mean, the list is extremely long as far as what the colleges do for our Oneonta area. I just want you to know how economically, if we did not have them, we would be, I want to say, like Otsego or Milford or, you know, all of the surrounding areas. We wouldn't have the Oneonta we have today if it weren't for the colleges, in my humble opinion. And I think COVID proved that by all of the lost revenues that we experienced when colleges were not in session.
So it kind of
So,
I
also says that we shouldn't be dependent on one sector.
no, I understand that. But, you know, I'm not saying that we don't expand. I just want to stress that, you know, it was just very, very evident.
And, you know, I mean, and of course, definitely, you know, sometimes I also feel though, like, if you drove through Oneonta and you didn't know there was a college here, you know, I'd love to see more involvement, you know, I'd love to see more of a presence with the college in the town, you know. I lived in Ithaca for 6 years, and, you know, when I walked down the downtown there, like, you know, there's a Cornell store, and, you know, you feel like you can feel the colleges, even though they're way up on the hills, you know. And so I don't know how we do that. Maybe it is, you know.
Well, Hardwick did, I mean, so Hardwick is installing that, the grain center there at the Plaza Beach, which is exciting.
Yeah, which is great.
I mean, that
Which
is
is
a
great.
step in the right direction.
Exactly.
I think soon
Mhm.
their new president, I believe he wants to be invested downtown. And
Yeah.
I believe our mayor is working that relationship. So
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's wonderful. I'm just stating that.
No,
I think that's really great, you know.
I completely agree that we need to see more integration of both formal education systems in downtown.
And if there are like different kinds of revitalization kind of, you know, things that come up, you know, and where you need volunteers, like having those college students help with those,
Yeah.
you know, like recruiting them to help volunteer to plant flowers or do things like in the downtown to make it more beautiful and have that community involvement. You know, something cool to nurture.
So I have two things. One is, as a member of the Oneonta Federated Garden Club, that they volunteer to plant the flowers, and also, I think financially they're responsible for the flowers that are planted downtown. So,
And they're beautiful.
and they're beautiful. They do a really
Yeah,
nice
they
job.
do it really nice.
The second thing is, and I'm sorry to circle way back to this, I wanted to ask a few minutes ago, but about, it's back on the historic tax credits topic. I know, and Otsego 2000 was involved in this as well, that we were looking into expanding our historic districts. I just wondered if.
That's in progress right now. So they have to do a historic resource survey, so they have to go out and like basically look at all these neighborhoods and then start to determine where we have districts that can be established or places we could expand existing districts. So that's the survey, I think, is done, and they're working on proposed maps.
Okay, that's cool. Thanks for the update. That's fine.
And I just have one last point, Len. I just wanted to bring it up so the committee's aware. And you probably, if I'm repeating myself, I apologize, but we do have restrictions of how the public can help the private. So for example, we cannot, as the city, work on any private property. So when we're talking public and private partnerships, we have to find the avenues that we're allowed to use.
Mhm.
And I just want you to keep that in mind. You know, those hurdles are there for reasons, you know, as far as keeping it separate between public and private.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
reminder.
Yeah,
I
I
think
just-
as,
I just-
and I don't wanna speak for you, Lily, but I think as like newer members and also just like big thinkers, sometimes we need that reminder.
Oh, definitely, I
Yeah.
definitely need that.
Yeah, it's just, we have many regulations that we just have to follow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, you know, even silly things like, we know it would behoove us to go fix it, but we're not allowed to.
Right, yeah. Mhm.
Well,
Good discussion. Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, that was really great. Thank you for staying late.